There's a dirty, horrible secret in this town, and we even as victims, we were afraid and ashamed to talk about it, and we didn't talk about it. It took 30 years to talk about it, and took 40 years to get to today.
Barry Murphy was just 13 years old when the abuse started.
I was being groomed from the start, as everybody else was, and we were given alcohol, we were given football shirts. We used to play football on a Sunday morning in a local park. It was only a casual game, and he was always involved in that. But he was very good at what he did, because everyone thought he was a cool adult. As I said, we were being groomed and we didn't even see it coming, and we didn't know what that was, but it didn't take long for the abuse to start. It went on, in my case, went on for probably the bones of a year, and all of a sudden then just it stopped. But I suppose I was getting to a certain age that he wasn't interested in me anymore.
The abuser was Bill Kenneally. The paedophile basketball coach used sport to prey on young boys. Gardaí were first alerted about the abuse in 1985, but it would take almost 30 years for Kenneally to finally face justice.
That man was protected because of who he was, because of his surname. His family had a massive amount of power in this city, and they wielded it any way they could. He was protected to the hilt.
10 years ago, Kenneally was jailed for almost 19 years for abusing 15 boys. The 75-year-old died in the early hours of this morning at the Midlands prison.
There was always this gnawing fear in the back of my mind as to, when does he get out? Where does he go when he gets out? Does he come back to Waterford? Even though he was an old man, is he looking for revenge? Who knows? So there's a huge relief there, absolutely huge. It's another chapter of this book finished and closed. I suppose there's a huge sense of satisfaction too that he lived to see the report published. Now, whether he read it or not, I don't know, but I'm sure he knew what was in it, and we were vindicated, and he was shown up to be what he was, an evil man.
Kenneally's death comes just over a week after the publication of a damning report into the response by state agencies to his abuse in the 1980s.
The guy was a complete and utter narcissist. Everything was about him. He lied under oath, claiming that some of this wasn't abuse, that it was consensual, that he also stated that he had given evidence to the police in 1987 that he should have been locked up, and because of the time that it was, he probably would have got a few months and then been out, and this would have been all done and dusted rather than him serving 19 years in prison, but it was all about him, and he tried and tried and tried to get his point of view across during his evidence in the commission. But again, Judge White, who was absolutely fabulous to us, and he treated us with compassion, and he treated us with respect. He wasn't short about putting him back in his box. He set out the parameters as to what Bill Kenneally was to talk about the day he gave his evidence, although he tried his damnedest to make it all about him.
The Justice Minister has promised a formal state apology for survivors.
I had come across that man between 1987 and 2012. I had come across him in my everyday life. One standout, and I mentioned it to a reporter recently, was being in a church on Easter Sunday with my kids and seeing him across the aisle from me. And there was a sense of shame, there was a sense of anger. It was horrible. It was horrible. So to be able to take him on and win.
Barry's urging other victims of abuse to seek help and come forward.
Absolutely, it's the only way. I've learned over the years that the only way to deal with things is to talk about them. And we as a group and men in general, across Ireland anyway, we bury things and we don't talk about it, and it'll be grand. It won't be grand. You meet it head on. You don't necessarily have to walk into a Garda station, but at least now there's places where you can go. There are people you can talk to. There's counsellors available. We never had that. We never had that.
Barry Murphy says he's proud of what he and the other survivors have achieved.
My wife has a saying, and she's a firm believer in karma, and she always says you reap what you sow, and I think today is evidence of that. I'm sitting here, I've got a beautiful family that I adore, and he's lying on a hospital bed dead in Portlaoise prison. So I think that says it all.